Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Haas Talks. Voss, I'm the Haas, Matt Yankovic, head of open source strategy here at Percona. And today I am with Clint Dovholuk.
Nailed it.
Oh, I practiced all day long, Clint. And so Clint is from NetFoundry. And, a couple of the folks from NetFoundry are going to be at Percona Live. They're going to be talking. And they have a product that kind of piques my interest here. Now, Clint, I've been talking about security in databases for a while, specifically because I have had my data breached so many times. My daughter has an inheritance of free credit monitoring, and I'm pretty sure my grandchildren will eventually have that as well. Because
you might consider using a firewall.
Well, this is my data breach, right? Someone else has my data out there. I wish they would protect it better than they are, right?
Very true.
But oh my gosh, yes. You can't turn around without seeing data being leaked all over the place, database breaches, this, that, the other thing. And, it's kind of a weird space we're in because we want more data. We have more applications than ever before, but then we're doing a really crappy job in keeping it secure. So,
Sure.
So I think we're in that weird space. And I know there's all the buzzwords around zero trust and,
Boy, it's the buzziest of buzzwords right now.
It is. So maybe you could tell us, what does that mean? Like, what is zero trust and how does it relate to the database side of things?
Yeah, sure. It's a great way to start off. So the first thing I'm going to say is while NetFoundry sponsors the OpenZiti project, it's not necessarily the product. So Voss, right? Free and open source. OpenZiti is free and open source. You can go get that right now. It's out on GitHub. That's right. Free and open source is where it's at. So NetFoundry is just the main sponsor of that project. I am a developer on that project. We have quite a few. And where it comes in is OpenZiti is actually doing something a little bit different. It's trying to bring zero trust into your applications. And so databases, not quite your application maybe, but very important to your application. And so zero trust, what is zero trust? Zero trust in a nutshell is really about having no trust or distrust of all networks everywhere. It does not matter if it is a private network in your Amazon data center or in your VPC. It does not matter if it's your home network, like the network I am on. It doesn't matter if it's the coffee shop down the street. Every single network is considered hostile. And that's what zero trust really is all about. There's a few main components of zero trust. The most important is probably a strong identity. So you think of X509 certificates are very strong, cryptographically secure identity. And that's what Ziti actually uses. We'll also call Ziti OpenZiti. So if you hear me say both, you don't think of the pasta, although we can absolutely get into the pasta jokes. Because
I like pasta.
I promise you, they've not all been made yet, but we're getting there. There.
Okay.
So strong identity, very important. And then another fundamental pillar of zero trust is authorize before connecting. So when you try to connect to something, if you aren't authorized to connect to that thing, you cannot connect to that thing. And this is actually ahead of even authentication of whatever you're connecting to. So in the terms of databases, you would have a secure zero trust connection from your application, whatever that is, over to your database. And then on top of that secure zero trust connection, you would also have your database authentication. So you could choose to use no password and rely on OpenZiti if you want, but you absolutely could layer on a second layer of protection, which is your own username, password, or whatever. Maybe if you get to present a certificate, whatever authentication mechanism your database requires. So that's OpenZiti, and that's zero trust in a real nutshell. There's a bunch more stuff, but I think those are like the key salient points.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, I think that, we have long strived for, that zero trust type of setup. I remember back in the day when I was playing around with different distributions, I I wanted a secure distribution, so I used OpenSSH or OpenBSD, which shuts everything off, and you can't do anything with the server. And it was like, oh my god, I can't do a single thing. And it was jarring because there was very limited things you could do, but it was super secure.
Sure.
I think the most secure application is one with no user access, right? So no users accessing, it's super secure. But unfortunately,
hard to get hacked when nobody can use it.
Yes. But I think that, obviously we want to use it. And so I'm curious, we always talk about defense and depths. So layers, you mentioned layers of different defense. So, obviously application logins, that's, critical. So from a database perspective, how does OpenZiti work in doing that zero trust connection? If I understand correctly, it's JDBC, or it's like the client connection to the database.
Yeah, we're gonna put on our swim trunks and we're gonna dive right in here because it's gonna get deep real fast.
Okay.
So let me just start out because you mentioned the security posture of OpenBSD having default secure by default, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a term you'll hear OpenZiti toss around. Secure by default. What does that mean? It means there are no listening ports on your network. That is Ziti's end all be all. If you can take an open source Ziti SDK and put it in your application, and if you can put it into your database, then what you can do is you can actually live in a world where there are no open ports. And so your database is only addressable on the overlay and not on the underlay. The underlay being, layer 3, layer 4 of the OSI model, TCP, IP, that type of stuff. The overlay being some ethereal layer that OpenZiti provides for you, the overlay on top of IP or TCP, which is somewhere between layers 4 and 7. We'll just say. So 7's still up there, right? And you could even say maybe Ziti might be even layer 8, but we're not going to go there yet. We're like, I like to make the joke that our security goes to 11, right? Have you heard?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So our OSI model goes to 8 because it's one more than 7, right?
There you go.
So how does that work with a database? A database is a little bit different because generally speaking, you're probably not going to be permitted to take an OpenZiti SDK and cram it into, MySQL, right? If you want to go and build it, you certainly could, but out of the box, you're probably not going to do that. So right out of the gate, we have to take one of those core tenets of no ports open. We know we're going to have one port open somewhere, but let's put that port just as close as possible to something else. So we have these things we call tunnelers. Mm-hmm. And what they'll do is they'll provide the offload from as close as you can get it to the database, ideally right on localhost. If you can put it all the way onto your database server itself, then you can only trust, and this is where trust comes back in, you can only trust your host's network. And presumably that's pretty good, right? Pretty good right there. You could also move that trust zone a bit bigger and trust your private network space if you need to. And so that's the server side of things. Now, when we talk about zero trust and overlay networks, it's very easy to forget that there's a client and a server. I started with a server this time. You started with a client because I'm going to bring it back to the client now. With the client, you have a bunch of options. We do these things when you take a Ziti SDK and you smush it into an application. We call that a Zitification. You have Zitified it. You've added Ziti into it. And so we have Zitified JDBC. So we have a JDBC wrapper, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then we also just have the straight up ability to create a socket connection. It's effectively a socket connection from your existing infrastructure. So inside of your code itself. So if you are a developer and you're actually writing that app, you can take that Java SDK and just smush it right into your application itself, and then just use regular, quote unquote, regular JDBC, and you'll be fine. That will work perfectly well. I have a great video out on YouTube. You can go watch. I use Postgres on MySQL, but you can go see how I did that with Docker. Now, if you don't have that capability, you're not the Java developer. Maybe you're using like what I use locally. You use what's that? And I'm blanking on the name of the database tool I use from from JetBrains. what is the name of that thing? Anyway, so you've got your database client locally. I'm going to come up with it. I'm totally blanking.
Okay. That's okay.
I'm totally blanking on it right now. But you've got that client that is capable of having a JDBC driver added to it. You can take our ZDBC driver, which is all we do. If there's a letter that can be replaced with Z for ZD, we'll do it. So instead of JDBC, we got ZDBC, right? That's Z-defied JDBC. And what that is it's a jar.
SQL.
Yeah, perfect. I love it. So it's a jar that you can include into your client, like a dbeaver is another good example. You can add it to your client. The client will bootstrap that jar, and that jar is smart enough to know how to poke the actual driver that you actually want. And so what it will do is it's not its own driver. That's really important. If it was its own driver, it's a maintenance nightmare on our side. We'd have to build drivers for everybody. That's not how JDBC works. That's not how ZDBC works, I mean. So what we'll do is we'll just poke JDBC in all the right places on your behalf. You provide a slightly different JDBC looking URL, and then suddenly you have a zero trust connection that knows how to ride on the overlay and knows how to offload from that tunneler at the other side as closest to the database as you can get it. And so you could have that MySQL server with no open ports to your local network, one local port to your local host, but not your local network, not your wide area network. And that would be how you would do it.
Okay.
So there's two different kinds of Zidifications there. The I can build it into my app, and the I have an app and I'm going to take your driver and put it into it.
Okay. So I'm going to oversimplify this just to make sure I got it right. And, because commonly when we're using either Postgres or we're using, MySQL or, Mongo or other databases in the space, there's often a proxy server or HA proxy or something to do load balancing or something to do redirects. Basically, your tunneler is something like that, but it's not exposing any ports externally. It's just there for the ZD connection. Correct?
That's exactly right, and
okay.
it can do load balancing.
Oh, okay.
So it also serves that purpose. If you need to have 3, machines, you can have a precedence set on that connection that says this is my main one. Only use this if I have to fail over, or you could just round robin it. You can do that sort of stuff too.
Okay. And so, as we talk about, that connection, most of us are used to setting up like an SSL connection between the app and the database, right? So, you'll do that and then you'll have your normal encryption. You can't see that connection because of, the layer it's in, right? And that's kind of the secret sauce there is it's kind of hidden. It's poked in the multiverse, if you will. It's the dimensional gateway,
it is kind of a bit of black magic. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
And so you're right. I would still encourage you to use TLS connection when you set up your driver, because even though you have that one local port on that one local host, if somebody got on that local host, if you're not using a secure protocol, it is technically able to be,
well, let's be honest, if they're on the local host, you got way more problems too, right?
It's usually very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
No. And I mean, I think that's where it's defense in depth, right?
Absolutely.
Make it as difficult as possible once you get there. So that's pretty cool. So, so in this space, you probably come across a lot of different use cases or a lot of different, problems that people are trying to solve. What are those common things that people are seeing in the space while they're looking to OpenZiti to solve it? Like, are there specific things that have happened or, occurrences or things that they're really trying to protect against?
Yeah, it's really varied because OpenZiti is that magic tunnel that gets you from point A to point B securely using strong identities, using all that zero trust networking principle goodness. You can literally run anything that you want over it, but there are quite a few common, very, very common use cases. The DevOps space is one that gets lots and lots of attraction because I went to a B-Sides event. I don't know if you're familiar with B-Sides, but it's a security focused conference. At the B-Sides event, there was a great presentation. And in that presentation, it was given by a fellow from company Snowflake. And he was talking about how he runs red team, blue team exercises. And he said he has never seen a red team fail an exercise. And the red team are the attackers, blue is the defenders. He's never seen a red team fail an exercise if they were given access to Jenkins. So Jenkins Ci Cd Pipeline, incredibly important, right? We've all heard about supply chain attacks. Jenkins is right in the middle of your supply chain. He's never seen a red team fail if they gave any access to Jenkins, which is pretty astonishing. We had our Jenkins on the open internet because, as our DevOps fellow that we have here, a site reliability engineer, he calls himself, his job is basically to open holes in firewalls, because that's what has to happen to make the business run. With OpenZiti, we're able to take all those and hide them totally. So we have a little agent that we run locally. If you don't have the capability of running it in the application, like we were talking about before, those tunnelers. So I have a tunneler running on my local machine right now, and that's how I get to Jenkins. That's how I'll get to Grafana. That's how I will SSH from my machine to a production machine. We don't have a bastion in the cloud anymore. We have a hidden bastion. We have a great blog post about what a dark bastion even means. How can you have a dark bastion? You have to have your bastion listening on port 22 somewhere. Well, you don't when you have an OpenZiti connection. So those are some of the big ones. I also did a video about SSHing in general. We zitified, and we made an SSH client, which is capable of SSHing to machines that don't have SSH open at all, which is kind of neat. So those are the big ones. But we have we have a customer who likes to provide access to their engineers. So the access is provided to their engineers through OpenZiti as opposed to a VPN.
Okay.
When you're on a VPN, which is the classic way of doing things, and then so what happened was COVID came around. Everybody left the office and went home, and work from home became a nightmare. Right? VPN was they were overloaded everywhere because all of a sudden there's all these connections they didn't expect before, and people didn't like their VPNs anymore. So we have some big customers who use OpenZiti in a way of replacing their VPN, but in a more controlled fashion. With OpenZiti, you can control access to the service. So if I told you had access to port 80, you could only access port 80. You can't access any other ports whatsoever. So it's a much more secure way than a standard VPN, where you generally have access to every port that is available and every IP on your VPN. So we have lots of people use that, but that's not our target, right? Our big target is actually app embedded. That's really like, if I were to tell you what the future is, maybe this is me having some of that Kool-Aid that is so popular, but it's really application embedded technology. That's really where OpenZiti shines. Now, it's a journey to get there, right? Like, I can't just go add OpenZiti to Jenkins because I'm not Jenkins. But for the most people, we'll still have our tunnelers because there will be programs that aren't Zitified yet, and I'll make my Zitified apps, and I'll provide my private connectivity over commodity internet wherever I am. Does not matter where I am, because I treat everything as hostile, including my local computer's network as hostile. And so that's where OpenZiti really shines. And those are the kinds of use cases I think are probably the most prominent ones.
Okay. Well, I like to kind of move away from some of the technical talk and do a rapid fire question. So, who doesn't like rapid fire questions? To get to know you a little bit more and to let our audience know who you are, in case they're interested. So, they are completely random questions that just pop into my head. So there is no prep work for it that you can do, like, unless you can read my brain, which would be really scary.
Maybe.
So, what do you think is the biggest, potential security threat in the coming years? Like, what do you see on the horizon that could cause some issues?
Well, I mean, it's not even on the horizon. It's right in front of us, right? Like, this is why zero trust is everywhere. It is literally the land and expand of networks. There's something a fella says that's I liked, which is networks were meant to share information, not secure information, right? Which is it's absolutely true. You make a network so you can connect somewhere else. And inherently, you are opening yourself up to attacks. Like, I love the Log4Shell. I mean, I don't love it, but I mean, like, it's just like there was this vulnerability in Java. I'm a longtime Java developer, and Log4j is a library that you would just bake into your application. And if you poked Log4j just right, then you could gain access to that machine, run whatever command you wanted to it. And so NetFoundry OpenZiti has a mascot called OpenZiggy, and OpenZiggy loves to tweet about CVSS scores. And CVSS is you said not technical. I'm going technical.
Well, no, you could be technical. Like, this is just a random popcorn question. That's totally cool.
So CVSS is cool because it's a way of gauging a vulnerability, how troublesome a vulnerability is. You see something over 9, like, you better act. So Ziggy, he loves to find vulnerabilities that are attack vector network, permissions required, none. If you have an attack vector network, permissions require none, that means you could be attacked from anywhere on the internet. Log4Shell was a 10. Like, you can gain root command access to that machine from anywhere in the world that had Log4Shell vulnerability on it. So, like, it's right here, it's right in front of us. This is why I really believe zero trust and application embedded zero trust is the future. So I think that's the biggest. I mean, we're seeing it with Ukraine.
Well, yeah. I mean, so this is an interesting one, because as you talk about, like, zero trust, and you talk about, like, supply chain type issues, or you talk about, CVs, like the Log4j stuff, that was something that was, whether it was malicious or not, I think it was just a mistake, right? Hey,
totally easy to make that mistake,
right? Like, it's a bug.
I've probably made that mistake,
right? It's a bug, like, it's something that's missed. But you start to see that there are people who we have put our trust into, especially in the open source space, because right now we are in a CI/CD world where it is grab your code, the latest version off of GitHub, and deploy.
Yeah, just go. Yeah.
Right.
Why would you not get the latest? Don't you always want the latest?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, hey, we're just going to deploy and we're going to see what happens. Right.
Right.
And you saw with, the famous nuked JavaScript apps, right? Like, so we had Colors and, a couple others. And then there was, so you mentioned Ukraine, there was some other open source software that, if you happen to be in certain regions of the world, that it, like, totally screwed up your website. So you could call it the rise, in one case, of protestware, or you could call it the rise of, nuking. We put a lot of trust into different components or different locations that probably haven't earned or can keep that trust, which is a different thing than talking about, like, a malicious hacker who is specifically targeting your network. And that's an interesting place, right? Like, it's something that I think as an industry, we're going to have to pivot and figure out how to resolve.
But hackers don't have to target your network at all. That's the worst part about it. They target all networks everywhere. It's, they just scan open ports and say vulnerable, it's like, so there's this great movie from the 90s called The Lawnmower Man. I don't know if you remember.
Yes, I remember The Lawnmower Man.
But spoiler alert. All right. So anybody who doesn't want to hear how The Lawnmower Man ends, spoiler alert. At the end, they're in virtual reality. Do you remember this scene? Mm-hmm. And Job is trying to escape because the protagonist had cut the landline back in landline days, right? And so now Job, the antagonist, is stuck in virtual reality, and he's sitting there and he's doing all this little, and you hear access denied, access denied, access denied. And what he's doing is he's dialing all of the ports outbound from his virtual reality space, looking for a port so that he can escape. Right. And that's what these people are doing. They're just dialing every single port that's everywhere until they find one and they get that access granted. And when they get that access granted, they just start hammering at it. That's why, to go back to the Bastion point I made earlier, like, if you leave your SSH server on the open internet and just watch what happens, like, you're going to see attack after attack after attack after attack. It's going to just test for strong ciphers. Are you using good ciphers? Are you using a reuse password? Here's a rainbow table attack of all the other passwords there might be, right? Like, it just happens. So supply chain is a whole different one. Like, supply chain and the building aspect of things, the inclusion of the software, definitely very different. In fact, that was what the B-Sides talk I watched was about, was securing supply chain, and how it just shocked me how shockingly easy it was to compromise Vault from within Kubernetes,
Well,
which I had never seen.
But I mean, yeah, so you've got it's the cascading impact, right? So, I've been in the open source space for 20 years. I love open source. Open source is awesome. A lot of the folks in the open source space are overwhelmed, and we saw that recently. Like University of Minnesota, they had a whole class who just tried to introduce vulnerabilities into the kernel, right?
Not so
which is like, let's see what we can get away with. And then you had like these other examples that was
just college students, like, not being particularly nefarious about it.
Well, right. And I think that like we've seen this kind of evolution there, but when you put that into whether it's a Jenkins space or Kubernetes or a Terraform space, if you're able to get to one of those nodes, the controller of the configuration, the controller of, what is, setting configuration, setting, orchestrating or, building out the servers. Oh my gosh, like you take a problem that is potentially like one server's hacked and now like, malicious code can be deployed to 10,000. It's kind of scary.
It's terrifying. It can happen in a heartbeat. No question.
Yeah.
The supplying of securing the supply chain is shockingly complicated. And so I actually, Ziggy tweeted this one day because that same fella Ziggy follows. I mean, there was some problem with some CVE with NPM. And it reminded me of the DNS haiku, if you recall, right? It's not DNS. There's no way it was DNS. It was DNS.
Yeah.
Right? So like when I saw the CVE came out, I was like, it's not NPM. There's no way it's NPM. It was NPM, right? Like I'm not dissing NPM because it's great, but the number of vulnerabilities that are coming specifically from that space lately have been significant.
Yes. Yeah. So that was a little more than rapid fire there, but that's okay. So we'll move on to the next thing, which is what is your favorite tool that you use on a daily basis?
My favorite tool. What's really exciting for me is Windows Subsystem for Linux.
Okay.
I am one of the people who enjoys using Windows generally because I like my software to just work. So it's nice when it does just work. And Windows Subsystem for Linux is a breath of fresh air for some fellow like me who has been running virtual machines forever. I also love my VirtualBox. So Windows Subsystem for Linux and the Windows Terminal, some of the things that lately I've been really excited for.
Okay. And do you hack away at code very often?
Yeah, every day. I was doing it earlier.
Favorite programming language?
Favorite right now it's Go for sure.
Go. Okay.
If you'd asked me before, it would have been C#, and before that would have been Java.
Oh, okay. Okay. Least favorite?
Least favorite was probably JavaScript. It's maybe Python. Okay. It's going to be any dynamically typed language. I have a strong disdain for anything that can be dynamically. Yeah, strong. I'm a typed guy through and through, so TypeScript is a big improvement for JavaScript. But Python gets a special place in my heart from the whole concept that you are encouraged to monkey patch things. Like that's just totally normal. Like go ahead and change the functionality any way you see fit. Go for it. That's encouraged. But it's hard to argue with something that works, right? Like working software trumps everything. And so if you can get it to work and that was what you had to do, hey, I get the job done. There
you go. You're wearing a Star Wars t-shirt. Favorite movie? Favorite one of them?
I like Rogue One the best.
Really?
That was I think that was I saw something on Reddit recently about how there needs to be more wars in Star Wars. And Rogue One was a war movie largely, and relatively sad ending. If anybody hasn't seen it, I'm not going to spoil that one because that's kind of recent. But relatively sad ending on that one.
Worst Star Wars movie?
Oh, worst. It's got to be, I don't even remember the episode one, whatever, A New Hope. Is that what it is? I can't even remember.
Like the original, the 77 version?
No. That's episode 3 or 4, my friend.
Oh.
1, 2, 3,
you said
4,
A New
5,
Hope.
6.
A New Hope was
I'm trying to come up with. Yeah. What was
the one with the kid? The kid
with Anakin.
Yeah. The Phantom Menace.
Phantom Menace. There we go. Thank you. Yeah. Not A New Hope. No, not A New Hope.
The Jar Jar Binks episode.
Yeah, it was rough.
A lot of hope for that movie, and it all fell flat.
Oh, it's terrible. And plus, Natalie Portman, great actress, but somehow the director made her come off just horrible, just so bad.
Well, she is the new Thor.
I saw that. That's pretty neat.
So she's the new Thor. So
there you go. The hammer.
There you go. Well, Clint, thank you for swinging on by, chatting with us a little bit about Zero Trust. Sharing some of the rapid fire questions there at the end. Appreciate you hanging out, and you've got a colleague who's going to be speaking at Percona Live, and by the time his podcast is released, it's probably going to be done. But you can check out the recording, which will be online, which will be cool.
I bet people will love it.
Yeah, I'm sure they will, especially if you're into securing databases. And for the love of God, please do that.
And if you could, can I say, OpenZiti, free open source software. Go to github.com/OpenZiti/Ziti and give it a star, because it helps us get that word out there, right? We're trying to let people know that application security and just security in general is probably really important, especially for your database, especially for your apps.
Absolutely. And, so Clint, where can they find you on Twitter, LinkedIn, all of the socials?
Oh, sure. Yeah. You can find me on Twitter. It's my last name, Dovholuk. I have no followers. Don't bother follow me. Follow OpenZiti, which is out there, and OpenZiggy, Ziggy.
Okay.
Both of which are totally out there. We have a YouTube channel. I usually do something very similar to this, live stream. It's more of a coffee style chat. We just talk tech. You're welcome to come if you're interested.
Anytime.
We just talk about random stuff. Usually it's OpenZiti related, doesn't have to be, but that's a cool YouTube channel that we have. We got the Twitters. We also have a discourse forum if you're interested in OpenZiti and you want to ask questions. And don't forget that star. I need that star.
You need a star.
It's like to like and subscribe, right?
Yeah. Speaking of liking and subscribing, if you're watching this, like, subscribe, and leave comments. Tell us what you'd like to see in the future. We would like that and appreciate it. Well, until next time, thank you for hanging out with us today, and we'll catch you later. Wow, what a great episode that was. We really appreciate you coming and checking it out. We hope that you love open source as much as we do. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And of course, tune in to next week's episode. We really appreciate you coming and talking open source with us.